This is a Sonic video game, and there's a lot of them. This is a Sonic Lego minifigure, and there's also a lot of these guys. And right now, they are all homeless, so I'll be making 10 different video games in plastic form to serve as homes for them. Let's get started. The first Sonic game released in 1991, LEGO's already released a set based off of the first zone in this game, Green Hill Zone. So I'll be basing my build off the following zone, Marble Zone. I grabbed some lavender masonry bricks and dumped cheese slopes to make some Lego lava. We also gotta add some fireballs for Sonic to dodge. Just because this will be a home doesn't mean he can be caught slacking. Do the animals typically live here without Eggman's interference? It feels like a pretty dangerous area. After spending some time building up the terrain, this is really coming together. I added some sand green temple structures to make it feel less empty, and then placed some rings for Sonic to collect. A random little thing I wanted to point out, I placed candle flames inside these translucent orange bricks, and it's not a groundbreaking technique or anything, but it looks cool and anyone can do it, it's super easy. For a final touch, I'll add a Caterkiller Badnik. Regrettably, he is not very color accurate, but LEGO hardly makes any pieces in lavender. Also, we need to add our blue blur. I'll use the Dimensions one since the first game deserves LEGO's first Sonic minifigure. Anyway, here's the final mock. It's quaint, but I think that's appropriate since this is what started the ever-expanding Sonic franchise. And we didn't have to wait long for said expansion because just a year later, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came out, which saw Tails join the fray. We'll be tackling Chemical Plant Zone, one of my personal favorites. The first thing I did was design one of those tire booster things, and next I started building out a path for the duo to run across, and also an industrial pipe to build on. When conceptualizing this video, it was important to me that I feature a loop-to-loop in one of the mocks. LEGO did this in a set, but it's low-key the lazy way out, so I wanted to challenge myself. And challenge is the right word for sure. This was the toughest part in the building process. I ended up using one of these bendable pipes and clipped on plates alternating between yellow and white. I used tree limb pieces in gray to funnel the plates into a loop-to-loop shape and repeated the process. After adding some finishing touches, we just need the minifigures. I'm using the Winking Tails and Sonic for this build, the least of the Sonic minifigures in my opinion. Shameless plug, but I uploaded a ranking of all the different LEGO Sonic minifigures on my second channel if you're interested. Also, a lot of these games I've recreated in plastic form before, so if you want more LEGO Sonic content after this video, check out my playlist in the description. Anyway, this one turned out great. I want to highlight the technique on display here before we move on. I left the sides exposed so you can clearly see the shape the clips have been forced into to get this thing done. It's extremely fragile and very illegal, but it looks sick. Sonic CD, released in 1993 and introduced Amy and Metal Sonic. I'll be building Palm Tree Panic, the good future specifically. The first thing I did was place a row of brown cheese slopes onto the base. For this technique I need a lot of nipple studs, but I'm running low. Thankfully LEGO has just released this botanicals polybag. I'm not gonna bother building it, I'll just pick out the transparent nipple studs it includes and alright, that should be enough. I'm using them in rounded 1x2 plates to allow me to place cheese slopes upside down to create a zigzag pattern, and then I'll cover up the leftover space it leaves with green 2x2 brackets. I used a mix of green and bright green for the terrain. In the reference material you can see golden pipes spanning throughout the zone, and to accomplish this I'm using golden bars, cones, and 1x2 plates to hold it all together. The plant life for this boss is very strange, one of the standouts being these star-shaped plants that appear like they're being roboticized. I built 3 of these star-shaped builds and moved on to the oddly shaped golden columns. And these were a fun challenge. I settled on using this rounded bar element and then clipped on lime branches, finally adding a magenta star to its chest. Okay, we need the Eggman contraption, the Egg HCV1. I won't drag this video out by explaining the building process because instructions are now available on Rebrickable completely for free. Okay, technically I made it with the color palette for the bad future, despite me building the good future. LEGO, please, make pieces in lavender. I do need to add Sonic though. I'll use the Angry Sonic variant, which just came out in LEGO's Campfire Clash set. Now we're finally done with the build. I love how the terrain turned out. The color palette is so different from my usual output, and the accent in gold adds so much. Alright, moving on. Alright, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. As you may have guessed, this game introduced Knuckles, and it came out in 1994 after combining the content of Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. We'll be building Mushroom Hill Zone, which is actually the first zone in the games where Knuckles is a playable character. Starting with the base, I stacked BrickHead's bricks on top of each other and covered them with dark tan plates. This level has this odd pattern on all the terrain. The closest color I found was yellowish green. In my previous video, I used this fun technique where I take Lego's new leaf piece and a nipple stud to allow me to place them upside down. However, this time I tried layering them on top of each other to make the foliage appear more full, I guess. Mushroom Hill Zone needs some mushrooms, of course. I added some small ones built from a hot dog element, and then 2 big boys with inverted color palettes. Finally, in the game, you can swing on this rope to fling yourself into a different area, and I built 2 columns with 2x2 rounded bricks, alternating between brown and nougat. I'll top them off with a printed log tile, and then add a bar for Sonic to grab onto. We just need some minifigures to populate this build. I'll add Tails, Knuckles, and the idea set Sonic. I love how this one turned out. It feels lusher and more dynamic than the usual builds. It may be my new favorite Sonic zone, actually. Nah, I'm kidding. No one will ever dethrone you, Studiopolis. Next, we're building Sonic Advanced, released in 2001, and this was actually the game that allowed you to play as Amy for the first time. We do see the introduction of Mecha Knuckles, a robo form of Knuckles created by Dr. Eggman. I'll be building that boss fight for today. First, I placed jumper plates on the base of the mock, and I built these stone structures using tiles and BrickHead bricks, and placed them along the front. Using modified bricks and headlight bricks, I grew some olive green plant elements to give it some much needed texture. To give the idea that this structure is older, I didn't tile off the entire area, instead opting for patches of tiles surrounded by exposed studs. In the reference material, you can see that tan columns are holding up the structure, so let's build those next. The base of the column is built using modified BrickHead bricks, and I surrounded them with slopes and tiles to try to recreate the intricacies of the handiwork. I stacked up 5 modified 1x1 bricks and placed 1x2 slopes to create a circular shape. I copy and pasted the columns 2 more times, and then I placed a stone structure to rest on the columns. All that's left is Mecha Knuckles. I had a lot of fun designing this guy. He doesn't show up in the lore very often, but he's iconic nonetheless. I mean, a robot version of one of the heaviest hitters in the franchise. That is a recipe for a formidable foe. I've created instructions for you to build this guy. In the boss fight, he starts off with red metal plating, but after smacking him around a bit, he transforms into a desaturated gray color. Feel free to use gray or red pieces depending on your preference. I have 2 winking Sonics, so I guess I'll toss my second one and Mecha Knuckles into the muck, and we're done. This one is neat, though the graphics for the Advanced Trilogy make it somewhat limited on how much detail I can include, but we're now 5 builds deep, which means we're halfway done with the video. Oof, this is gonna be a long one. I'll move on to Sonic Advance 2, released in 2002, which is also the year I was born. Let me know in the comments which Sonic game is your birthday game. I'll be building the Egg Frog, which is the boss fight for the Egg Utopia zone. I'll start with a base of dark green bricks, adding a pattern of light gray grill tiles, and then topping it off with sand green bricks, and then a pattern of metallic grill tiles, white tiles, and sand green tiles. A pretty standard build, but it gets the industrial feel across. Now for the Egg Frog. First it was the Egg Viper. It looks nothing like a viper, and now we have the Egg Frog, which also looks nothing like a frog. Eggman, seriously, get a new naming convention. You struck gold with the Egg Dragoon. What happened here? Anyway, I grabbed 4 small wheels and used a 1x4 plate with 2 pins to clip them on, and then I surrounded them with angled plates and connected the build to the system of joints I've created. I slotted in 2x2 cylinder builds and connected them both to the body. For a few final touches, I'll add headlights and exposed wheels on the top and bottom. Oh, and of course we need to add the Egghead himself. As for Sonic, I'll pick the keychain Sonic just to add to the absurdity. Now the build's done. This build looks so goofy, but I think it turned out well. I wanted to add a layer of walkway but above the Egg Frog, like in the game, but the result was way too fragile and gimmicky, so we're just gonna stick with this. On to Sonic Advance 3. Released in 2004, it served as the introduction to Gemroll, an upgraded version of Emerald, built by Dr. Eggman. I'll be recreating one of the many Gemroll boss fights you go through. I've got a lime green base that alternates between tiles and plates, and I'll take the printed tiles from Lego's idea set and line the front wall with them to resemble the texturing of the level. Next, I'll add some flowers scattered around the mock. The trees in the reference material have a very interesting, uneven design. To recreate that, I used jumper plates plates stacked on each other and topped with some palm tree foliage. Gotta add Tails and Sonic, of course. I'll shoot straight with you guys, Jim Roll was very difficult to design. Here's what I cooked up. He scales well compared to Sonic, but I'm not sold on his head, specifically his eyes. But that's part of the job, I guess. Sometimes things just don't turn out perfect. Here's the final mock either way. Maybe someday I'll take another crack at Jim Roll, but for now, this will do. Next up is Sonic the Hedgehog 4, released in 2010 and 2012. This game was split into 2 episodes, but they're so short, I think it's fair to combine both. This is by no means a fan favorite game, but I grew up playing episode 2 on my iPad, so I'll always have a soft spot for it. Let's recreate Sylvania Castle Zone. For this build, I tried a building technique I'm quite proud of. To capture the feel of an aging castle, I placed a row of bar elements and began clipping 1x1 and 1x2 tan plates, leaving some space between each row to give it an imperfect feel. It seems like the castle's been flooded over time, and to recreate that, I'm using 1x4 translucent blue tiles to form a box of water. I built the remains of the castle and some plant life to put inside the water. I'm using dark green for the grass and placing green flower studs and translucent green plates throughout the patches of grass. Finally, I can add some rings for Sonic to snatch and another castle wall to give it a bit more verticality. Let's add Tails and Sonic with a life jacket. He can't swim after all. This is one of my favorite non-boss fight Sonic mocks I've done. The techniques on display here are so fun, and I think they capture how much I've grown as a builder over the year of designing hedgehog-themed creations. Next up is Sonic Superstars, released in 2023. I've built Sonic Superstars before, and I've gone on record and said it's my least favorite Sonic mock I've ever built, so I think it's deserving of a remaster. I covered the base in jumper plates and tiles, and built dozens of these stones. I sprinkled in some sand green to mix up the color palette, and then placed a few tiki torches on the back wall. There are instructions over on my Rebrickable page on how to build Eggman's mech if you're interested, so I won't cover them in too much detail. The game doesn't give it a name, so I'll be referring to it as the Egg Mace, per suggestion from my Discord. The new version of the Egg Mace is leagues ahead of the previous attempt. His arms even spin 360 degrees, just like in the reference material. I'm happy with how this turned out, but there's still one more Sonic game to build. Shadow X Generations, the most recent game to come out. I'll be recreating Radical Highway, an iconic zone in its own right, and in Shadow X Generations they pulled no punches. This level is a fever dream to the senses, and I took that as a challenge. First, I built the start of a bridge to work off of. It's important to have a sturdy foundation, and you'll see why in a second. I built a ton of near identical segments of the bridge, using slopes to polish off the sides, and modified bricks to add the dark gray road for Shadow to run on. After making a mess of my Technic pin collection, I placed one in every hole. This should not be taken out of context. Now I can slot all of them into place, creating a strip of highway that I can shape however I please. I'll add some rings, a spring for Shadow to launch off of, and Doom's Eye to watch over him. Oh, and it's a highway, so I'll add a few traffic cones. Now we're done. This build is so cool, and members of my Discord server will know that I've been saving this design for a while. I'm pleased to finally get to show it off, and for the first time, I'm selling instructions on how to build one of my mocks in its complete form. But I was so happy with how this turned out, I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to recreate it yourself. Wow, a long video and 10 builds later, I can safely say we've built Sonic's history in LEGO, and boy is it rich, featuring some stellar and not so stellar games. But I think I need a break from our blue blur friend. I wonder which gaming icon I'll tackle next. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Be sure to subscribe and keep on inspiring.